Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. This is Christy Clavijo Kish with Latina Mom Bloggers. I hope everyone is doing really well today. Thank you for joining us. We have the line muted and have been joined by Stacy Ferguson of the Be Blogalicious community and by Stephen Chavez of Chavez Multicultural PR and the National Incoming President of the Hispanic Public Relations Association. So, welcome everyone today. We're going to have, hopefully everyone can see my screen and you are able to ask questions by posting them via your questions button on the right hand of the screen. And we are sharing our information today via the hashtag pound brands and blogs. So if you have any questions, definitely or questions and comments and sharing of the information by using the pound brands and blogs hashtag. So we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit of information about us, and that's me on the screen. So I'm Christy, a partner with Latina Mom Bloggers, which is part of the Hispanicized Digital Services team. And I'm also a co-founder of Los Tweens and Teens blog at lostweens.com. And I have been in multicultural public relations and marketing for more years than I care to remember, but have been around the blogging sphere for quite some time now, with the FTC guidelines definitely being something that every one of us needs to be aware of, both from the public relations perspective and from the blogging perspective. So today what we're going to cover is the two sides of the bar, and talking to us mainly from the blogger's perspective is going to be Stacy Ferguson. And Stacy is a very well known online as Justice Fergie. Welcome, amiga.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, we're very excited to have you with us. And Stacy is the founder of the chief curator, blah blah blah, chief curator, and a co-founder of the Be Blogalicious community. And she is the founder of the Justice Fergie Lifestyle Media company. And so, with that, her definitely interesting background is that she used to work with the FTC, and she is an attorney by trade. So we're definitely going to hear a little bit more from Stacy, and you'll be able to ask her questions. And Stacy is going to really address the part of the discussion from the blogger's perspective, just making sure that we are aware of the guidelines and are definitely following them and working through them with everything that we post and do. And then our amigo from the PR side of the fence is Stephen Chavez. Um,
Hi.
Hi, Stephen, and I'm so glad you're here with us. And we are so excited that you're incoming president of the National HPRA Association. So, welcome to you. And you're going to address for the group the perspective from the public relations and marketing. So, what do you need to know as a brand and as a marketer when you're reaching out to blogs or being more familiar via the blogger networks, etc.? So, we're definitely excited to have you guys here. And the format, again, the hashtag is pound brands and blogs. Please do share the information. You can also send us questions that way, or you can send them on the screen. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to go through a series of questions with our panelists to address them, and then you can also send us some questions. So it is our first one. We're going to have a series of webinars for the PR, marketing, and the blogger side. So this is our first one. So stay tuned for more to come. So anyway, so let's get started, guys. So how do the new guidelines, and Stacey, I'd love for you to explain to everyone exactly the perspective of there being guidelines, and talk to us a little bit about how do we apply that from a business perspective, and for startups that may consider themselves digital advertisers, but in fact many are.
Sure. Thanks, Christy. So, this is a great question because a lot of bloggers don't necessarily consider themselves as businesses, right? We think that we're just writing our stories and sharing our likes and dislikes and sometimes doing some reviews. So, why do these guidelines apply to me? And so, I think it's really important that we discuss how, in fact, as soon as a blogger decides to work with a brand, whether it's through a product review or a sponsored post, or they go on one of those really cool blogger junkets, that automatically means that they're now working on behalf of an advertiser. And once they cross that threshold, it means that they're actually their content on their blog, on their Twitter profile, on their Facebook profile, that is all going to be considered to be in commerce. And I say that in quotes, in commerce. And that's important because once speech becomes commercial speech, it's no longer free speech that we normally hear and think about under the First Amendment, right? Um, Speech that is commercial is subject to certain laws. And that's where the FTC disclosures come in. So if you are a blogger, if you're have a blogger agency, um, if you have a community that is working with brands, PR firms, advertisers, then and if you're talking about products, then you have to understand that you are subject to these guidelines, and we can get into what those mean. But that's some of the context for where we're going with today's discussion.
Terrific. Stephen, did you have some insights to add into that from the PR perspective?
Well, I think overall, just the FTC new guidelines, they are, guidelines that they're giving to us as brand marketers. And so it's important for us to really take a look at your own business and the company you're representing, and reviewing your policies and processes in regards to the influencer endorsements and public relations. We like to think about it more as third-party endorsements versus an advertisement. And so you need to have your agency revisit those policies, make sure that you're understanding that it is your responsibility as a brand marketer to ensure that the disclosure statements, any kinds of language is simplified, stay away from any kind of jargon, legal jargon, making sure that the end user or reader understands that this is a sponsored post, tweet, message, video, however you're going to be using the information. It's that brand PR person's responsibility that that blogger understands it, that if you're working with a website, they understand the language that you'd like them to use.
Yeah, I think what Stephen's point is really great, that it's all about what your audience understands. And that's really the magic rule that I share with people whenever I'm being asked questions about these guidelines. You have to think about it from the perspective of your reader or your follower, wherever your audience is. And so if your audience has to understand that you have been given some incentive to say what you're saying. And that's what this is really all about. So if you're given something to try out for free and you're talking about it, your audience should know, hey, you were given that for free. And that's what it comes down to. So when you're questioning, am I disclosing the right way? Is it enough? Is it not enough? Put yourself in your audience's shoes and see whether it would make sense to you. And that's a good rule of thumb to go by.
Mm-hmm.
And that's excellent, because sometimes people wonder what's too small to disclose, or it's only a big ticket item that you should disclose. But the reality is that if it was small, but it pertains and is of particular, it's valuable information to that post that you are writing about, then you should disclose it.
Exactly. There's no hard and fast rule about the dollar amount. If you got, a box of cereal to try out for free, if you are endorsing it and saying great things about it, then your audience should know. So it doesn't really matter that the cereal costs $4. It's all about your relationship with the brand. That's what you're disclosing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stacy. That's great clarity. Alrighty, so we will go on to our next question, which is about it really pertains to new bloggers. If you had to name a top 5 must-dos to stay informed and in compliance with the latest FTC guidance, what would some of those top 5 be, Stacy?
Okay, so your top five would be to make sure that you are not relying on a blanket disclosure. So I see some bloggers, they have a page. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, it went really quiet. I want to make sure I'm still there. Um, oh, there we go, a phone. Um, so I see some bloggers have a page on their website that you have to click on that discusses what their disclosure policy is, and so that's a something not to do. That's not going to work. So I would say what you have to do is make sure that your disclosure is right next to wherever your endorsement is, wherever the advertisement is. So that's definitely one. Um, Number two, I would say, is to make sure that your disclosure is understandable. So there's a lot of chatter, right, as to what am I supposed to say? How do I disclose? Do I use a hashtag? Do I use a symbol? And so I would say tip number two is to make sure it's easily understandable. My favorite is plain English. I think that a lot of bloggers get too hung up on using hashtags that really don't mean anything. So if you can just say it in English in a plain sentence, I think that goes a really long way. Number three, for bloggers, I want everyone to make sure that nowadays we can sync everything, right? So we post something on our blog and it can automatically feed to our Facebook account, our Twitter account, wherever it goes, Pinterest. You have to make sure that if your blog post title has an endorsement in it, has an advertisement in it, that the disclosure has to be in the title because the title is the thing that's going to travel across platforms and your disclosure has to travel too. Does that make sense?
I think,
Yes, no? Should I explain more?
yeah, I think maybe work that a little bit more.
Sure. So, for example, if I got a pair of sneakers from Nike, right? And I'm writing a blog post about how much I love the sneakers, um, in my title, if I'm going to say, love my new Nike sneakers, you know, they changed my life. Okay. So that's an endorsement, although a general one, about the Nike sneakers. So your disclosure has to go right where that endorsement is.
Ah, very
So
good.
you're
Okay.
so you're just so personally, I would say I love my new gifted Nike sneakers or free Nike sneakers or something in English that lets people know that I didn't pay for them. They changed my life. In that way, when my post automatically feeds to my Facebook page, my disclosure is already there. Or if my post automatically feeds to Twitter, the disclosure is already there. I don't have to worry about it. Um, you have the option, of course, of turning off your auto feeds so that once you write your post, it goes to your blog. Then you're going to manually take your blog link and paste it into Twitter, paste it onto Facebook. And then you can write a disclosure that's appropriate for whatever the platform is, right? Maybe you really love hashtags. So you put your post link on Twitter and you can put pound ad or pound campaign or whatever it is that you want. Um, but for me, I feel like if I do it in English, it can transfer across platforms. I don't really have to worry about it. Does that help?
Definitely.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. So those were three, two more. So I would also say, uh, as a rule of thumb, and this is really basic, and this is just my personal rule of thumb is, would my mother understand my disclosure, right? Because we're we're all sorry, mom, but we're all in digital media. We're used to this stuff. We see posts all day long. We see tweets all day long. We know when someone is at a blogger event. We know what that hashtag means, but we are not the average consumer. And the FTC is concerned about the average consumer. So it's not the person who fully understands all of these platforms that we're really used to. So if you're making a disclosure and you don't think your mother or mine would understand, it's probably not clear enough. So that's why I don't like things like pound spawn, because it doesn't mean anything to anybody. That's why I always prefer to use a plain English disclosure or something really obvious like pound ad. But I know for a lot of us, pound ad kind of looks ugly and we feel like it takes away from our genuine content. So that's why I say to just try to build it into plain English.
And Stacey, if I can tag on to that, I think it's also important for bloggers and brand and PR folks to remember that, the FTC, although they're not saying that they're going to be monitoring blogs and websites or individual social platforms, but what they are getting are they're fielding like thousands of consumer complaints daily. And that's why it makes it even increasingly more important for PR professionals to be mindful of how consumers are reacting and perceiving of the company. And so, like you said, if it's jargon and someone didn't see it, but they feel like they got ripped off somehow, and they file a complaint, the FTC isn't going to go after that blogger. They're going to go after the brand who is the one who's sending out the free goods or doing the promotion. And so it really makes it imperative for us to respond quicker and take corrective actions when we see a blog post that does not have the proper disclosures, the bookends, as I like to call it, bookend disclosures, where there's a disclosure up front, so the person who's reading, the consumer who's going to read the post, knows right away that this is a sponsored ad, or they got some free gift, and then at the end as well. And so proximity of that disclosure is really important. But again, it falls upon the PR professional, the brand marketer, to make sure that whoever they're working with in terms of the bloggers, they're monitoring that and they're protecting. And I think that's a key word, as we're protecting consumers with these guidelines. You also need to protect your brand with these guidelines. It's a way, as PR people, you're protecting the brand from any future potential lawsuits.
Stephen, I think that's huge. It's really, really important. So, when I was at the agency, I would see sometimes the brands thinking once the blogger did the campaign, they were kind of free and clear, but the responsibility really does lie with the brand and the advertiser. And so, even small marketing firms, you want to make sure that you have policies in place for your influencers, so that when you are hiring bloggers or word of mouth influencers to spread your messaging, you have to share with them, hey, these are our policies. If you're going to write about this, you're required to disclose it. Here are best practices. That little bit of coverage will go a long way to protecting yourself, your reputation, and also legally. Because sometimes maybe it's not a legal issue, but your reputation is the most valuable thing you can have as a brand, right? So it's really, really, really important.
Yeah, I know at times with PR, as we're reaching out to potentially the blogger network groups or individual bloggers, we've got an event coming up or we've got a new product, it can get icky. I mean, honestly, it can get where you're like, you don't want to be too
very icky.
Like the big brother. You've got to do it this way. You want that blogger to feel that they can, authentically, represent or endorse your brand or your product. And so I know that it gets a little awkward sometimes, I think, from a PR perspective, coming down with the strict guidelines in terms of what we want their blogs to post in terms of disclosures. But as we move forward and there's commerce happening more and more online, it's just a matter of, again, sort of putting away that feeling of awkwardness and saying, you know what, I'm doing this because I need to protect my client. And once you get that mindset, you'll understand the need to monitor what bloggers are doing on your behalf, and you'll be more diligent about it. That's it.
And that's right. And I think an easy way, not an easy way, but a way to kind of make the process less stressful or intimidating is to really just make it simple. So, as a blogger, I've worked with PR agencies who give me this long paragraph to put at the end of my posts. And that's scary. And nobody wants to read that. Nobody wants to put it in your post, right? Um, but a lot of times they get the language from the legal team at the brand, who are very, very worried about things. Um, but the key is to remember that the disclosure doesn't have to be a paragraph long. It doesn't have to have legal jargon in it at all. It really just has to, it's really three things, right? It has to be clear, it has to be conspicuous, and that just means that it has to be prominent. So that's why, Stephen, your bookend disclosure suggestion is a good one. And the third thing is that it has to be unavoidable. So again, your bookend one would work in this instance. It means that somebody reading your post or your tweet, whatever, they can't miss the disclosure. And so as long as the disclosure has all of those three things, then you're fine. And so it doesn't have to be a very complicated matter.
I think that's really, I mean, I think again, for PR people to understand, because I know working with like the mom bloggers, for example, Christy, at the end of your posting instructions, you'll instruct the blogger, you must add this line for a disclosure at the end of your blog post, right? And it's a specific copy. And I see different bloggers, they'll put that exact language at the end of their post. Stacey, this is a question for you. Would you recommend that blogger to push back a little bit and say, no, that's not how I would say it. My readers, I'm a little more edgy than that. I'm going to say it this way.
Right. Yeah. So of course I see it. I see both sides, right? From a blogger perspective, I know my readers and I know what's going to work best. So yes, from the blogger perspective, I would say push back as long as whatever you're pushing back with meets all of those qualifications. But from the PR side, I get it, right? If you make sure, let's say you have a campaign with 50 bloggers, you want to make sure that they're all putting this one sentence in because that makes it easier for you to monitor.
Right.
And you already know that it's been pre-approved by whoever needed to see it, so that makes it easy for you. So I see both sides of it. Um, if a blogger pushes back and says, I would like to do it this way, then you do have to go that extra mile to make sure that whatever it is they're doing meets your standard. But both work. It's just a matter of what's easier.
Right, and actually we've added to follow the guidelines that it needs to be on the top. So some of our bloggers have opted to do it as the bookends analogy, which is at the top and at the bottom. But I really like the suggestion of incorporating it into text, right where it belongs. So it definitely depends on the style, but I think that's a great suggestion and definitely to be looked at further. I know we could go on, and you've gotten 4 of the 5 that we asked for. But one, I wanted to add a question from one of our bloggers, Claudia, where she's asking, as a blogger, if I don't endorse any brand, do I still need to have a disclosure of any kind? And then I wanted to also pose to this question, and then we'll move on at the issue of language. But let's address Claudia's question.
So no endorsement, no disclosure needed. It's that simple. The disclosures are only for advertising. So if you're not saying anything positive about the brand, then you don't need to disclose it.
Excellent. Okay. And then what about language? So what about if your blog is in Spanish or it's bilingual or it's in French? How much is the FTC taking a look at additional languages outside of English?
That's a great question. I don't have a specific answer on that. My gut feeling is that if your blog is very popular, lots of traffic, high profile, then it could very much be on their radar. So you'll want to make sure that you're disclosing. Of course, you want to do that no matter what. Um, no matter what language you're writing in, as you want to make sure that you're meeting those 3 guidelines of it being clear. So if your blog is in French, your disclosure has to be in French. and it has to be prominent, and it has to be unavoidable, no matter what the language is what I would say.
And you also have to remember, again, the FTC is not so much monitoring the blogs and the websites, they're really fielding the complaints. So no matter what language that complaint comes in, if there's a complaint registered against a certain blog who misled a consumer about a certain brand, it's going to go back to the investigation of that brand and what
Yeah.
um, their practices are when they're engaging with bloggers or websites. And so it's, again, listening, I think, is a key with a capital L as a brand marketer, listening to what people are saying out there online, and quickly responding if you're hearing someone complaining about being misled. That's a huge flag that you'll need to rectify and either go back to that blogger immediately and see what they wrote and or posted and say, okay, wait a minute, we need to correct this, and have some sort of follow up directly with that consumer who's complaining.
Yeah, what Steven's saying is like so important. Um, no, nobody's perfect, right? So brands make mistakes, bloggers make mistakes. Everyone's human, but the key is how you follow up with that. So if you see a complaint, if you see someone making a mistake, if you see somebody not putting a disclosure on as a brand, as a PR professional, follow up right away, and do what you need to do to make sure that you're um, meeting your obligation of making sure that your influencers are disclosing. There's a lot to be said for how you handle the situation once you realize that there was a mishap.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question and then we will take a couple more from the audience. So we are on for veteran bloggers because, there are definitely a solid group that has been out there, such as yourself, Stacy, working in the trenches for quite a while and developing the blogs and have excellent followers. Are there any nuances with the updated guidance that should be especially followed by the veteran bloggers? Because they're going to have the extra traffic that you were talking about. So, is there anything that they definitely need to be aware of?
So, and I think for the most part, veteran bloggers already know this is not news to them. They're not freaking out about this. Um, the only other things I would add, and I've kind of touched on it already, is when your blogs are your endorsements are feeding across multiple platforms. Because like 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't have those plugins that synced everything everywhere, but now we do. So just make sure that your disclosure is traveling across platforms. Um, for veteran bloggers, also make sure that your disclosure matches the medium. So, for example, if you're doing a video on YouTube with audio, your disclosure has to be in the audio. Um, that's another tip.
Hello.
Did I lose you guys?
No, I'm sorry. I muted myself accidentally.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry. Sorry about that,
I,
everyone. Okay.
I'd like to add in terms of the disclosure required, even, she mentioned audio, but, video claims and endorsements, um, multimedia messages and campaigns. I know more and more brands are asking bloggers to, create videos along with the campaigns using the products. And so the disclosure must be included in the video itself, not just on the landing page or in the video description. It has to be actually that disclosure must be included, and again, probably bookended up front and then at the end of the video.
Excellent. Okay, so there was actually a question regarding video content producers and branded entertainment. So this you're suggesting the same, that it would function as a bookend disclosure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And again, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that came out of the FTC new guidelines is the fact that they realize there's this multimedia platforms that people are using. So, Twitter obviously being the big one, but it's not just Twitter. It's
Mhm.
videos and audio that people are using and sharing links online with that still need to have these disclosure statements.
Exactly. So if your video you post it on YouTube, but you're sharing the link on Facebook, if your disclosure is on YouTube, in text, it's not going to travel to Facebook. That's why your disclosure has to also be part of your video.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Well, I wanted to remind everyone this is Christy Clavijo Kish with Latina Mom Bloggers, and I wanted to remind everyone that our hashtag is going crazy, but if you joined us a little afterwards, it is pound brands and blogs. So definitely join us via the hashtag. We are sharing lots of information that way. All right, so on to our next question is going to be, if hashtags are not necessarily for compliance, how do PR and advertising professionals show they are promoting an ad or sponsored activity on character limiting social media platforms? And I think we touched on this a little bit. Stephen, perhaps you want to address this one initially?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, we're like Stacy said, we're a hashtag um, society community, but it's I mean, again, we tend to, because we're living in the space as marketers, we understand what a hashtag spawn, SPON, means, or giveaway kind of thing, but the average consumer doesn't. And so the guidelines provide even more, I want to say, specific for brands when it comes to sharing with influencers. They're you know to include the hashtag and the word ad, or the word ad and colon at the beginning of a tweet. And I think that's been the hardest part for bloggers and for people who are doing promoted social cross promotions of their links, etc. And I know it's tough because, again, in public relations, we don't want to see the word ad because it sort of takes away from what we traditionally have learned and know about PR, which is earned media. And that goes back to the larger debate on paying bloggers, pay for play kind of thing. But if you're paying for play, that's an ad. And so, again, you need to encourage your bloggers, as they're cross promoting your their post, your promotion. They need to include ad upfront, and sponsored as well, to disclose in multimedia platforms.
So yeah, what Steven said is right. I think for whatever reason, we love hashtags, and so that's not going away. So I think we're finding ways to use them effectively. I still, though, say that plain English is better, and that way you're not stressed about the platform, and that way you're not stressed about characters, because pound sponsored could be longer than free, right? If I just put it into a sentence. Um, so I like to use words. It also lessens the pay for play feel of it. So if I see a tweet that has add colon something, it changes immediately my perspective of what's coming after that colon. But if I just see a sentence, a regular tweet, and I'm reading it and I see that there's the word free in there, or gift, or sponsored, or complimentary, then I digest that a lot more easily, personally, which is why I always default to using plain English.
Excellent. I think one question that I really like hearing is from Natalia Carter. Her point is that she's a food blogger. She goes to a lot of places and products, and things that she likes, but she doesn't get paid for it. Should there be, and you mentioned before, if there's no payment, there's no need for disclosure. But sometimes people are assuming because you said something nice that you are getting paid for it. Should there be something of a no follow, or something that indicates that you're not being paid for it, so that you're very clearly indicating to your audiences, I just like this, and I'm just saying that I just like this? Is that necessary, or it's really not?
So that's like my pet peeve. I absolutely hate seeing not sponsored.
There
Like,
you go. There you go. Okay.
I
No
get
filter.
right now filter. Exactly. I get why people do it, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, it's because so many of our posts are sponsored that you feel like you have to say when it's not. But I feel like that dilutes everything across the board when you say, I was not paid to say this. So my preference is to not say it. There's no requirement to say that you were not paid. Um, the requirement only kicks in if there was some material connection between you and the advertiser.
Right. And again, it goes back to know your readers, know who are the people who are reading your blog, and so I don't know, maybe that blogger feels like their readers would appreciate it more if they did say that. So there's no hard fast rule, but
True,
I agree with
true.
Stacy
Yeah.
that I don't like to see it. I mean, I want to feel like a blogger is authentic enough in what they're covering and writing about that they are going the extra mile and seeking out those experiences with brands that they're not being completely always being bought for or sponsored for, that they're sharing with their readers um, their true experiences and whether it be good or bad, because I think that helps build their audience. And I think I don't for me anyways, I tend to get turned off by bloggers who it's always a sponsored post.
Right.
Okay. They're just being a
And
mouthpiece.
it's
For,
not good for I'm sure Stephen you would agree, like as a PR professional, if you're looking for a blogger to participate in a campaign, if every single post is a sponsored post, you probably don't want to work with them anyway because it
yeah,
doesn't look like you'll get any special attention.
right. Absolutely.
Alrighty, great. Well, that's actually I'm glad that that question was posed. So, alrighty. So, is the FTC cracking down further on blogger disclaimers? I think that we've covered that. I definitely wanted to go back for a moment because I don't know if our audience heard it. We're still getting questions regarding the language. If you put your disclaimer if your disclaimer is in English but you write in Spanish, should your disclaimer also be in Spanish? If we could address that again, I'm not sure that everyone heard it.
Yes, it's so exactly what Stephen just said about think about your audience. So if your audience is reading you in Spanish, you have to communicate with them in Spanish. So your disclosure should be in whatever language that the advertisement was made in.
Excellent. Okay. And we have another question from the audience. What about bloggers that are producing their own materials, printables, ebooks, branded T-shirts, etc.? Are there guidelines that apply to that? I mean, I'm assuming that that's just personal marketing material, but I think it's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So if yeah, I don't,
If I created my own like cookbook, you're saying, and I'm promoting that on my blog,
Right.
there would be no disclosures needed.
right,
Right.
right,
Exactly. That just falls under personal marketing.
Personal marketing.
right.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Alrighty, so our next question is, should your blog disclaimer include even small items? I think we talked about this at the beginning. And the audience really should know about the theme in terms of is it relative to your audience? Because if it was an egg roll, but you're reviewing a Chinese restaurant, then you should know about it.
Exactly. Yep. There's no dollar minimum or maximum. If there's a connection between you and the brand that your audience would not know about unless you told them, then you have to disclose that.
Right. Although I would say this, that if you were given by a PR person a memory stick with press materials, you don't need to write in your post, why
Right.
I was given a memory stick with press materials that
Please don't.
help their product a little bit better.
Right, right.
I mean, that's,
But here's the thing though,
but
Stephen,
if
they
you're giving
wouldn't.
away memory sticks
Right, exactly.
that
I was
has a
just gonna say,
branded
like,
logo on it, you need to say that, this is part of a giveaway, a sponsored giveaway post.
right,
You're not just
exactly.
giving it out of the, you didn't go into your wallet and purchase 50 memory sticks and now giving them all away to your readers.
Right. And if you got the free memory stick with the, because if that's the case, then I owe people a lot of disclosures.
Yeah.
Um, but but it's not like you're gonna go home and write a sponsored post about the actual memory stick, right? So that there's no advertisement there, so you would need to disclose that.
All right, and how about, and this is another good question posed by the audience. How about when you're attending an event? So over the weekend, there was the Disney Social Media Moms event, for example, and very clearly it was indicated that, you are receiving items for attending and what have you, and so monitor that in terms of how you disclose. So what if you're attending a sponsored event? How does that impact your disclaimers?
This is a sticky question. So Disney social media moms, perfect example. I was there too. So if I'm going to write about the fact that I was at Disney, I need to disclose that I was largely subsidized to be there, right? Because I do have a connection with Disney that my readers may not know. Um, Now, we all went to the conference and we all got free things, right? Um, Here's the question that you want to ask yourself: Was I'm trying to put this very carefully. So Disney is not requiring us to write about the Winnie the Pooh stuffed bear that we got, right? There's
Exactly.
no expectation that we're going to do that. So we're not necessarily incentivized to write about that. So we don't have to disclose that we got that. If you decide to write a post about how much your child loved the Disney Pooh Bear, then yes, you should say we got it for free. But all of those different gifts we got, um, everybody got them. So we're all on an equal playing field. And also, there was no specific expectation that we're each going to write about those things. So a disclosure may not be required. That's a lawyer in me saying may.
Right. So then it really goes back to what you're writing about. So it all goes back to, in its essence, it goes back to what you're writing about and presenting to your audience and whether there was an exchange or not. Would that be a fair rule of thumb?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we talked about that one.
I
Stephen,
know people were stressed about it at the table.
yes, exactly. Well, Stephen, I think that that's important to address from the very beginning, right? Because this tends to come out of the communications or the marketing department.
But
So how I thought it was excellent the way that it was very clearly addressed from the beginning of this event over the weekend. So how can PR people and marketing and branding folks be clearly aware of that and addressing it from the beginning? I think that might be helpful for our marketing audience that's on the line.
yeah, and again, I would hope that these revised guidelines do spur brands and their agencies to again revisit their policies and processes. So, so looking at when do we talk to the bloggers who we're inviting to our corporate headquarters about disclosures and what we're going to be giving them and what our expectations are. I think all of that has to be revisited and planned out as if you were planning out a crisis, media plan. You have to be prepared and you have to think about all of that beforehand and get that policy in place and make sure that all of your not only your communication staff internally, but the agencies that you're working with understand your corporate policies and processes. So do we do this in the beginning? Do we send them notes of instructions at the end? My feeling is that everything should be upfront, transparent of what you're looking for in terms of if you're a brand or a company and you're engaging with bloggers. The expectations have to be laid out very clearly and simply upfront, and so that they know as they're walking in and they're accepting the invitation, what the company is expecting, what that brand is expecting.
Excellent. Okay. Let's go to our next question. But actually, I think there is a really good one here among the group, which is how does a Twitter party work? So if you're participating in a Twitter party, but you're paid to support the Twitter party, but not to write a post about it, should you have a tweet that explains, that you are being paid to support this program?
So Um, this is a big question. So, so having a tweet at the beginning or end or middle of your Twitter party explaining that it's sponsored will not work because, as we know on Twitter, the way that the platform is built is that everything scrolls. And I could hop on Twitter after you've already posted your tweet about the disclosure and never see it. So your disclosure has to be inside the tweet where you're making the endorsement or the advertisement. Nobody likes that, of course, right?
Right.
Because it can get cumbersome. Two things. So think about how a Twitter party works. Every single tweet is not going to be an advertisement, right? If we're talking about how much we like this iPhone, every tweet isn't going to be how awesome the iPhone is. That would be a very boring Twitter party. For the most part, Twitter parties are conversations around topics surrounding the product, right? So every single tweet isn't an actual advertisement. The ones that are, however, need to have a disclosure in the tweet. Um, the other side of that dialogue is that in the updated guidelines, the FTC very explicitly says if the platform you're using cannot accommodate the required disclosures, you shouldn't be using the platform. So nobody wants to hear that either.
Hmm.
So when you're creating your Twitter party, think about whether you're going to be able to comply. And if you can't, maybe you take your campaign off of Twitter. But I do think that there are ways that we can still do Twitter parties and still be in compliance.
Okay. That's excellent. Stephen, did you have something to add?
No, I think she covered it nicely.
Okay. We had another question here. How about nonprofit organizations? So you touched before on the fact that if you're not being paid to disclose something, then don't, annoyingly have to say, no, I'm not being paid to say this, I just like it. Is the same apply to if you're helping promote a program for a nonprofit organization? And an example being given is the United Nations vaccination movement, not being paid to do it, but you are supporting a mission of some kind. Do you need to disclose that you're part of the program? So how do the guidelines work in terms of initiatives that you're supporting if you're not being paid and if you are being paid from the nonprofit perspective?
Can I
Great,
get
great.
clarification? So if I'm a blogger and I'm being brought in, not being paid, but being brought in as part of like their blogger ambassadors because I support that initiative and I wouldn't mind being part of that initiative. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, basically is if you're joining an initiative, you're not being paid to do so, but it is an organized
It is an
initiative,
organized.
yeah, to provide information, then um,
Yeah.
I think.
So I'm a Shot at Life ambassador for the UN Foundation vaccination program, so I get the question. Um, so I would say yes, make the disclosure because you do have a material connection with the quote unquote advertiser. So maybe they're not selling a product, maybe you're not doing a product review, but you are promoting the cause, right? And part of the Shot at Life program is to raise money to provide vaccines. So if your reader comes upon your blog and sees a great post about the Shot at Life program and decides to donate because of your post, they should know that you're writing about it because you have some relationship with the organization, even if it's not paid. So
excellent.
for and payment is really a broad term in this context. So maybe Shot at Life doesn't pay you in dollars, but they did invite us to a really fabulous summit at their UN headquarters, or they do other things that could be considered forms of payment. So if there's a connection that's not obvious to your readers, then you should always disclose it.
Mm-hmm.
I would always like err on the side of caution.
And be creative with it. I mean, like Stacey
Right.
mentioned before, you don't have to be so blunt about. But there could be ways of, talking about being proud of being being asked to be an ambassador, or being asked to be part of this initiative. And again, so that way the reader knows, oh, you're part of a group, you're part of this initiative. I get it now, you know.
Right.
But making it very clear in your language and in simple English that you were invited as a blogger to be part of a program, and you've accepted.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think that was definitely a helpful one because I know that there's been some question regarding nonprofit. And then even if it is, so even if it's a nonprofit program and you're being paid, it really is going to function then in your standard disclaimer format, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think that definitely would help in terms of clarity. All right, so we will get on to we're running out of time. Crazy how the hour has gone so quickly. When you're talking about fun FTC guidelines.
These people are masochists.
I tell you. Okay, so we're at this question again, the financial budget considerations, and especially mindful with regards to the guidance. I'm gonna let you guys provide a couple of tips one more time because there are folks who have joined us late, and so or while we were already in progress. So maybe some of the quick tips again in terms of the disclaimer notices.
So yeah, so again, there's no minimum or maximum dollar amount. If you are writing about something and you were paid to or you got the thing for free, you should disclose it. But like Stephen said earlier, use your best judgment. Um, we get flash drives, we get the water bottles. You don't have to disclose each one of those things unless you are writing a paid or sponsored review about that particular item.
Excellent. How about this is a question from the audience, which I think is great, from Paula, with growing up bilingual. What about when you have had a past relationship with a brand, but you're not currently being paid by the brand, but you still have an affinity and you like it? What happens then? Do you need to disclaim that you have previously been paid by that brand, or you're just basically sharing now?
Yeah, great question. So great, in fact, that it was addressed in the FAQs on the last set of updates. And I can give you guys the link as to where to find that document because it has a lot of specific scenarios with best practices answers in them. Um, so it depends is the answer, right? If you got a car a year ago and you disclosed it then, but you're still writing about the car today, you probably want to keep disclosing that. It's a big deal. If you got, a flashlight and you really love it and you keep writing about it, how many times do you really need to disclose that? It's all what your audience understands. Um, some of them who are your regular readers, they already know you love the flashlight, right? We know that you got it for free. You know you work with this brand, so you may not have to disclose it every time. It depends on how often you're talking about the thing and to what extent. That's the best answer I have. But again, I can point you to the FAQ doc that talks about it more.
Yeah, if you can share that link with everyone online, and then if you give it to me, I can share it with everyone as well, Stacy.
Sure, if I type it in here, will it? I'll try that.
I believe it should be able to send to all.
Okay.
And then, Stephen, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, again, the whole reason behind the FTC guidelines is determining whether a blogger or endorser has, like Stacey says, a material connection to that brand, um, and how that has produced content on their site. And so if you can, and again, creatively just mention the fact that, a year ago you received that Mercedes Benz and you're still writing about it. You could do it quite simply without having a full legal disclaimer on there.
Mm-hmm.
But there is still that material connection, which needs to be underlined to the brand, which is why now you have content and producing content.
Excellent, excellent. We've got suggested reading as a question. Interesting question here we've got from Isabel Garcia. Is a book and disclosure required for a giveaway? And is disclosure required on Facebook as well, or just on your blog post?
So the disclosure has to be wherever the advertisement is. So if you are making an endorsement on Facebook, you have to disclose on Facebook too. Um, and I already forgot the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Is it required for a giveaway?
Oh, well, did you get a product too? That's a good question. So if you got a product too, and you're writing about how great the product is, encouraging your audience to enter your giveaway, then yes. Um, Most of the time, we don't do the giveaway out of the goodness of our heart just because we want to do it. Most of the time, we've gotten paid or we've gotten to try it ourselves. So usually a disclosure is required. If for some reason you just have this thing that you want to give away, but you have no connection to the brand, then I guess you wouldn't. I've not seen that situation happen though.
You know, one that I did see is that someone was given an item at a conference, and then they turned around and felt that it was something great for their readers, and they wanted to share that item that they received at this event with their readers as a giveaway. So in that case, that needs a disclosure?
So it depends on if there's an advertisement or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just say, "Hi, I'm giving away this book," then there's no ad. But if you said, "I love this book. It's fantastic. It's great. Blah blah blah," then you're endorsing the book. So then you need that disclosure. So it depends on what you're writing about the product.
And again, I think that if we walk away with any tip at all, it definitely is that it depends. If we could give it in a nutshell, is that it depends on the product, it depends on the initiative, and it depends on how you are presenting that in your post.
Exactly.
Awesome. Stephen, anything that you'd like to add?
Regarding that point, no.
And in general, just for our PR and marketing folks out there.
Yeah, just remember that as PR people, you want to mandate a disclosure policy that complies with the law. So you want to again revisit your policies and processes. You want to make sure the people who work for you, whether it again be your staff internally or your agency or the bloggers you're working with, know what those rules are and those policies are, and it's very clear on your expectations, and then monitor what they're doing on your behalf. It's no, I mean, it's one thing about monitoring to see whether or not people are writing about your brand. It's another thing to monitor blogs to see, make sure that they have the proper disclosure statements tied with your brand.
Excellent.
And it takes a different kind of eye to look at that. And so if you have an account executive or an account coordinator or an intern who's pulling together reports for your brand in terms of like bloggers who are posting about it and on a specific campaign, you need to sit down with that intern or that account coordinator and explain to them what you're looking for. You're not only just looking for them to like get the link to that blog post, but you want them to read that blog post and make sure that they've got the mandatory disclosure statements associated with that brand. And then for them to flag it when they don't see or read that disclosure, so then you can follow up with that blogger in a very respectful way and ask whether or not they can add that to their post.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's obvious that this is a hot topic and information that we definitely need to continue just analyzing and being aware of. So we definitely invite you to watch our Facebook and Twitter stream and the Latina Mom Bloggers website for upcoming webinars. We're going to try to have these monthly, and if they're not monthly, they're every month or so. So we're definite every month-ish. We'll call it that. So we're definitely looking forward to sharing more information, and we definitely thank our phenomenal panelists today, Stacy Ferguson and Stephen Chavez. And a lot of you have asked if we're going to have a transcript. We are recording the session, and so we're going to download that and make it available very soon, and also with a summary post via our various platforms of Hispanicize, Being Latino, and Latina Mom Bloggers. So thank you again, you fantastic panelists. You can continue reaching out to Stephen and Stacy via Twitter or Facebook, and they're pretty easy to find at Justice Fergie and at Stephen. Stephen, your handle, say it for everyone.
At Stephen Chavez PR.
At Stephen Chavez PR. All right, we should have had that on the screen. Duh, this is so much for social media people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.